This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support.
Hybrid Cloud Show, episode 50. I'm Aaron.
I'm Gary.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Shane.
Welcome to the show about public cloud, private cloud, and everything in between. Our views here are ours and not those of our employers. So, Sean, I understand you had a little bit of a disaster with your home lab.
Disaster is an understatement. It was a full-blown catastrophe. And I did it to myself, to be honest with you.
I did tell you about running Kubernetes in your home lab. I did tell you it was crazy.
Yeah, I think I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. I don't know how you guys have done Kubernetes at home, but I'm just using the K3s with the embedded Etsy database. Anybody have familiarity with that?
I am also doing that and have recently moved everything into this setup. So I'm very curious about your story, Sean.
Okay, so I recommend setting up some sort of snapshots for your etcd database, because that's what happened to me. I had a corrupted database, and can anybody guess what happens if your Kubernetes master nodes go down?
Rainbows and unicorns?
A good time?
Opposite of both of those. That's what happened to me, and I, out of desperation, started looking for etcd control and how to use that tool, and didn't really know how to use that. So I was asking Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude all at the same time just to get a consensus, and try to remove any bias. And all three of them basically told me, it's no problem. You can just run these commands. And I said, absolutely not. I won't do that. So I tried doing it myself, and I lost quorum, and I had to reset my whole entire cluster.
Now, having dealt with this problem in Red Hat OpenShift in the past, I can tell you that that was also my solution. It was basically to go and grab all of the YAML files for the deployments, blow away the cluster, start again. Now, thankfully, this was only a dev cluster, but it was still a very painful weekend. One of those weekends where a CTO is breathing over your neck and really, really wants to buy you as much curry and beer as possible until the problem's resolved.
Sean, was your setup for etcd single node or multi-node? Did you just use the K3s defaults?
It was multi-node. So I had 3 API servers, 3 master nodes, and then I had 3 worker nodes.
Right.
If we take a step back for people who are less familiar with the internals of Kubernetes, can you just give a quick rundown of what role etcd plays in your Kubernetes deployment?
So usually when you're using Kubernetes, you think of it as a state machine. But in reality, what's actually happening is there's a database keeping track of all of your resources, all of your custom resources, and what current states they're in. You can sometimes use MySQL or Postgres to do this, but there's an easy option if you're using K3s for an etcd database. It seems like a very lightweight, good choice for quick, high availability.
And it is by far and away the most commonly deployed choice. Like, if you're getting into deploying MySQL or Postgres as your backend for your Kubernetes state, you're probably doing something either at massive scale or a little bit off the beaten path, and you're on your own.
Exactly right, Gary. So I thought that was a very sensible thing to do, and so I did it. But with Postgres or MySQL, I can go in there and I can mess around, I can edit, I can back it up really easily. I've never had to do that for etcd. Has anybody here tried backing up or messing with etcd databases?
Thankfully, I didn't.
Yeah, no, for me, it was very much just snapshotting the system state, which would include the drive that etcd was on. But this wasn't running on ZFS, so it would have very much not been a point-in-time snapshot. There could have been changes and all the rest of it.
Yeah, me either. So, I followed all the practices that I've taught Shane over the past couple of episodes, right? So I had all my stuff in GitOps solution, so I should be able just to blow it all away and it'd all come back, right? Not exactly. So after I had reset one of my nodes, it was now alone, and the other 5 nodes thought they were part of another cluster. So I had to carefully rebuild my control plane by resetting my other master nodes and adding them back and pointing them to the same load balancer as the one that I had reset. So one by one, added them back until all 6 were now in the same Kubernetes cluster.
Okay, so you've rebuilt your control plane, and then you've attached what was running before back into that control plane, rather than blowing the whole lot away and then deploying it all again.
Exactly right. So then I've got Kubernetes itself running. Now I have to get my applications running again. So my next step was, great, let me install Argo CD, because that's what I've used for my GitOps solution. So I go grab the quick kube control command, I run it against my cluster, and quickly Argo CD comes up. No problem. Unfortunately, I was so used to using Argo CD through an ingress, and I didn't think, oh no, I don't have an ingress controller. I don't have, Metal LB for a load balancer IP. How am I going to get to this?
Okay, so you've got Argo CD. You normally access that through Metal LB or something, right? I know loosely what Argo CD is, but why is it that you're accessing it at all? What are you reaching in to do?
So you have to do a little bit of configuration to just tell it what repo you're going to point it at, and then give it a token basically to authenticate with. So that's all I wanted to do. So I just need to port forward real quick, and I'll be off to the races. So port forward one of the server nodes, 8080 to my local host 8080. And I get in there, I put in my credentials, and I say, great, sync. And then I thought that would be it. I'd be done. Until I realized I had stateful data, and I was using Longhorn, and there was definitely some chicken and egg scenarios coming up that I was not prepared for.
Before we get into your chicken and eggs, can I ask what might sound like a facetious question? But you're always talking about infrastructure as code and how everything's all, deployed automatically. What was to stop you just nuking the whole lot and then just redeploying it all with your infrastructure as code?
So I was already pretty nuked. I was a clear paving path at that point. All I had was Argo CD, right? The issue was, in my brilliance of not committing any secrets to the Git repo, I didn't have a solution for secrets management in Kubernetes. So I didn't commit my token and my repo configuration to my repo, so I couldn't just all of a sudden restore by giving it a YAML file.
And what were you using for those secrets? Were they just stored as Kubernetes secrets and you didn't have a backup of them anywhere else?
Exactly right. They were just stored as random Kubernetes secrets, nothing special.
Yeah, okay. So you ended up in that scenario where you wanted to go and redeploy Longhorn. You didn't have the secrets that you needed in order to go and access the encrypted volumes that the data was stored on or whatever. Therefore, until you deployed that, you couldn't deploy any of the services. You couldn't deploy that because the secrets were gone. Yeah, that's a whole mess, isn't it?
Yeah, it was, Gary. Yeah, it was. I'm glad you understand the pain.
So effectively, though, you got a bunch of YAML manifests you want to apply. You don't have the secrets to actually apply them and get them back up and running. Is it a case of manually reapplying those secrets again? And that's not an easy problem to solve. But is that, it's particularly if you've lost the secrets themselves. But is that the thing that unblocked you, or was there more to the story?
Yeah, that's right. So I had to deploy some secrets for Cert Manager and for Longhorn so I could get my S3 backups into my cluster again. But then it was, okay, now I'm restoring my data. Now Longhorn's up. I've got my volumes back. Everything from there actually went pretty smoothly. I was really impressed. I didn't think my Postgres databases would come back, but actually they had a timestamp of when the latest backup was. And so I was able just to say, try to restore from at least close to this time. And the Zalando operator actually tries to get the closest snapshot it has to that time. And then it restored that immediately I didn't have to do any kind of other configuration. Just the pod stood up. It grabbed it from S3 using the same secrets that the whole cluster was using. And that was it. All my Postgres database is back in high availability. That was pretty cool.
It's very interesting to hear about your recovery story, but I'm kind of interested to know how I avoid this in the future. So you said that you have a multi-node etcd, and so that should have tolerated one node failing. What was the actual thing that broke with etcd that caused this whole clusters out?
What happened was I lost quorum. And when I did that, I basically had a split brain situation where for some reason it couldn't get RAF consensus. And that actually ended up corrupting the Etsy database. And so I tried removing nodes, adding nodes back, and seeing if that would help it kickstart. And apparently whatever I did only made it worse.
Yeah, so this is almost the exact scenario that I had when SCD broke on our OpenShift cluster, where there was an AWS networking blip between, I think, like one of the availability zones couldn't talk to the other two or something like that. And it was just long enough that it couldn't associate quorum. And then, like you say, we ended up in this split brain situation where the cluster that was in AZ3 thought that it was its own cluster, and the cluster in AZ1 and 2 thought that it was its own cluster. We hadn't noticed this, and then the connectivity came back up, and then things just broke because they all thought they were master at that point.
Interesting. So some sort of networking issue happened, Sean, that caused a split brain in your cluster.
That is my investigation.
And things started to corrupt. That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's probably really terrifying with your 20 quid TP-Link switches, Shane.
I've replaced that. I've got a slightly bigger Unify switch. It's great. But yes, I need to think more about network resiliency right now. Have you done anything to avoid this problem? What do I need to do to avoid this problem in the future, Sean, is basically my question.
You need to buy a bunch of servers, rack them up, have multi-NICs, and it's going... No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. The reality is I don't know. I don't know what actually caused that. I know that me messing with it definitely made it worse. I don't know if it was a network issue or if, one of my disks died and it couldn't write the latest state to the disk. I do not know. But what I do know is I definitely made it worse. And the worst part was I was looking at all the commands available to me to try to solve this myself because I don't trust, ChatGPT to do something like that. And I saw there was built-in functionality for SCD snapshots into like K3S. It comes with the binary. I just didn't know. I didn't know how to use it or make of it. I've never read any blogs about it. So I think maybe that's something I should do.
Yeah, I feel like using the built-in backup tooling for etcd in the same way that you would any other database might be a good place to start. But again, this was the same thing that I fell down the rabbit hole of, was we just weren't backing up that database appropriately. We were following all of the best practices for things like Postgres and MySQL in the rest of the estate. But for etcd, we were just allowing AWS to run the snapshots on the volumes that etcd was on. And we were keeping those, and we were using AWS backup to push those off to another account in another region. But they weren't all point in time. We weren't getting consistent etcd state across all of the master nodes in the cluster, of which there were 6. So we never had a consistent etcd thing. What we'd have probably had to do is just hope that one of the 6 latest snapshots of etcd was taken while the database wasn't being written to, and then restore that and hope that we could get quorum from there. So using the built-in tooling to actually appropriately back it up is maybe a good place to start investigating, I'd say.
This episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. Nothing compares to a home-cooked meal, and HelloFresh makes it easier than ever to enjoy them all year long with recipes that are cozy, flavorful, and a pleasure to make night after night. Gather everyone around the table with meals that are simple to prepare and deeply satisfying, even on your busiest evenings. Choose from over 100 weekly recipes featuring global flavors and comforting dishes designed to lift your mood through the colder months. Feel good about what you're eating with wholesome ingredients like sustainably sourced seafood and chicken raised without antibiotics or added hormones. Wow your guests or spoil yourself with new grass-fed steak ribeyes and create meals with seasonal produce like pears, apples, and asparagus. When dinner tastes this good, nothing hits like home cooking. Sean tried HelloFresh and said he loved the varying rotation of choices that means there's always something new to try. So go to hellofresh.com/HCS10FM and get 10 free meals and a freeze-willing knife, a $144.99 value on your third box. Offer valid while supplies last. Free meals applied as a discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. So, if we take it back a bit, have you changed anything to make it easier to sort yourself out in this situation next time?
I had this great idea to go to my favorite podcasts and ask the host there, please help me figure out secrets management for on-prem. I've used things like Vault before to do that. However, I don't feel like running Vault on my home lab to do that. It's just because I just have the gut feeling like, let's deploy this on Kubernetes, and you can't deploy it on the thing you're trying to restore, right? So how do you go about that? Do I just suck it up and leverage a cloud service?
Well, the thing I've done in the past is for what we used to call DevOps or infra team services is to run those outside of the cluster, because I don't necessarily care about high availability or the state machine-like functionality of Kubernetes, because the reality is it's a team of like 4 or 5 of us that need access to some of that tooling. And if I run that in a VM that is sitting on top of ZFS that I could snapshot back up in a more consistent way, just standalone on Docker, and handle the high availability of that VM in Proxmox clustering or Hyper-V clustering as we did it back in the day, that probably gets me 90% of what I need, because I don't necessarily care about having 3 copies of that running or whatever. I just care about it being online when I need it. So simplifying the deployment of those really critical services is probably the first thing that I would look at.
In terms of secret management specifically, I have taken the advice of some of our very helpful listeners, and I'm using Bitnami sealed secrets, which it's very easy to use, but also feels kind of dodgy that you're basically committing sealed secrets to a repo. But it works. Like I use something called KubeSeal to seal the secrets for my cluster, and then I just have a controller running. I add a secret manifest to each of my apps, and I just whatever secrets it needs it defines, and then the secrets are there available in the namespace. So it does work pretty well. Obviously, you need to have the secret to be able to unseal your secrets later should you need to recover everything, but it's pretty good.
But that secret you could store out of band in a password manager or a safe or something like that, couldn't you?
100%, and it's not a big pile of them that I'm assuming Sean had the joy of having to recover.
Yeah, I mean, you could split those secrets out by namespace, by application, in whatever way you wanted. So you could have 5 different sealed secrets, I suppose.
Yeah, I literally, for each app, I have like, the PVCs, the Helm release, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then just the secrets that it needs as well as another file in that folder of what represents that app. So it's quite nice. It's very GitOps friendly.
Just don't do what I've seen people do in the past and base 64 them and commit them to a repo, assuming that's fine.
Have any of you used the encrypted variables and files, Ansible Vault stuff?
So yes, I have used Ansible Vault in the past, and that has worked fine in a small team. I think for me where it fell apart was automation, because you've then got to store the Ansible Vault secret somewhere in order to have your CI/CD access it. And then where am I going to store that? Do I store that just in Jenkins or in Argo CD, at which point it's kind of available anyway? I've never really thought of a reasonable way to then store that Vault secret to then unencrypt that stuff on the fly when I need it.
Sealed secrets sounds like the way to go. And I do remember some of our listeners writing in on that. And I looked at it and I thought, it's too much for me. But is it really? Because that seems like the only way to go about it without standing up additional infrastructure. So I think I should probably take a look at that. Good call.
It's just a controller and then the YAML files basically. So it's pretty lightweight. It does feel like it's very designed for like home labbers like us that aren't going to use some separate dedicated secret management system like Gary's suggesting.
And is that a cloud service or is that something you self-host?
No, it's just another controller you run on the cluster itself. You use a command called KubeSeal to like seal your secret, and effectively it has the ability to then decrypt that for your services inside your cluster, but it's all running inside Kubernetes on your home lab. So no external connections.
So the only secret you would then have to restore if you ended up in Sean's situation would be the sealed secret.
Yeah. Then you're applying all the same GitOps operations that spin up your PVCs, you're spinning up your secrets, and you're spinning up your actual applications themselves all in the same operation. So rather than Sean's long manual step of manually recovering secrets, we recovers one secret and then all the secrets get decrypted on the cluster itself.
Is it a bit like the master password for that vault that's then unlocked and then everything has access to it or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly that. But your cluster itself is the master password holder vault effectively. You're using the public key from the controller running on the cluster to seal the secrets. So the controller is anything that actually has this information.
Right. And it's running across your cluster. So it's got high availability.
It's running on the control plane, yeah. So it's as available as your control plane is.
That would have saved me so much time. I could have recovered in minutes instead of an hour, which all in all, an hour isn't bad to get all my, my volumes and PVCs back.
You said that it only takes about 1 hour to recover your everything, basically. That's still pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, my what's it called, recovery time objective, right? RTO. That was an hour, so that's pretty good. I was especially concerned with how long it would take to get all of my things off my NAS and like all my PVCs restored. But actually, that was, I mean, my largest PVC is only 50 gigabytes, so it didn't take too long actually.
So what did you actually need to recover with your PVCs? Was it just reconnecting them back up to your NAS, or was there more to it?
So a couple of my things that I really care about, like Image and Nextcloud, are actually PVs backed by NFS instead. So those are direct mounts to my NAS, and the data immediately goes there as soon as it's transferred over the application. But some of the other ones use PVCs for other things that I care about. So my Postgres databases use what I would call ephemeral PVCs. They're not, I don't back them up in Longhorn, right? Because they're actually getting backed up using the native mechanisms, WAL-E, WAL-G, to an S3 bucket. There were some though that I wanted, like for Loki and for Prometheus, so I get all my metrics back and I could have only a small gap instead of starting fresh. And then I have a couple of stateful things like just Postgres databases for just users and stuff for backing some of my other applications. So it actually wasn't too bad.
In my mind, I've got like a bunch of PVCs and PVs that are basically mounting stuff on the NAS. If I need to recover everything, I would just reinstantiate those volume mounts and just remount from the NAS. So nothing would need to be recovered. However, I suspect I am oversimplifying how I would actually recover this.
Yeah, there's a key distinction between my setup and your setup, Shane, which is your PVCs map to a PV which is backed by NFS, whereas mine are backed up by Longhorn. And while Longhorn is actually NFS under the hood, it means that I have high availability with just my cluster, and I don't need my NAS for my PVs.
For anybody who's imagining anyone dressed in PVC, do you want to give a rundown of what PVs and PVCs are?
Fair enough. A PV is a persistent volume, and a PVC is a persistent volume claim. A way to think about this is you can have multiple persistent volumes, but only one pod or workload, let's say, can really claim access to that persistent volume to then use it to write the data. And so a PVC is then assigned to a given workload to say, I have control of this PV, of this persistent volume. No one else can write to it.
So this is one of the reasons that I wanted to push Shane down the path of just using NFS raw when he started out, because essentially it is the same as any other NFS mount in terms of the way that the data read-write is happening. That means that you can use all of the built-in tooling on your NAS to do things like snapshots, backups, replication. And the only thing that you in your situation would have to worry about restoring was like Postgres replaying wall files or something if it didn't get stopped cleanly, which usually happens fine, particularly in a homelab. And then your persistent volume claims would have to recreate, but they'd happen when you use the Git ops to go and redeploy the container anyway, assuming the nodes had access to the storage. So it simplifies your setup quite a lot. The only thing that you end up with that Sean doesn't have is a single point of failure on the NAS, whereas Sean's is a bit more hyper-converged and the storage is available across the cluster.
Got it. But your Longhorn setup depends on the Kubernetes cluster being functional. So that's complicated your restoration, right?
It's one of those things, isn't it, where it's a real trade-off between having the high availability of Longhorn, but understanding those trade-offs you're making in terms of the complexity of it. Like Shane, yours is really stupidly simple, but you might have a higher RTO, RPO, depending on when you are taking and replicating ZFS snapshots for those volumes. Whereas in Sean's setup, he might have like minute by minute snapshots of some of these things. You would probably have to remount those NFS volumes onto a new NAS that had already received the snapshots. So your failover is a lot more manual than Sean's would be in a normal use case where your NAS went offline.
Got it. Yeah. That makes sense.
This is heading to a key question, which is, has this made you reconsider your multi-server, Kubernetes, whatever homelab, and just replace it all with a Wise 5070?
Even on a Y5070, I'd still be running Kubernetes. So, no.
I'm not sure you would with that maximum of 12 gigs of RAM and a Celeron CPU. But sure, why not? Maybe that's a challenge for me on the Wise 5070 that I run. Go and set up a 9-node Kubernetes cluster and see how far I get. I don't think it will be very far.
I'm running Wise 5070s on my Kubernetes cluster.
But as a worker node, right?
As a worker,
not an entire cluster on a single Wise 5070. I mean, I've got 3 of them. Maybe I could get a small cluster going between 3, but that feels like a lot of hassle.
Just run very small applications on it.
I mean, that's what I do now, but it's just 2 standalone Proxmox hosts, so it's much easier.
Well, that sounds like a good place to tie things up and leave Gary to it. We'll be back in 2 weeks. If you've got any questions or comments, please send them in to show@hybridcloudshow.com. Until then, I've been Aaron.
I've been Gary.
I've been Sean.
And I've been Shane.
See you later.